Hey, good morning. So today I'm here talking to Helen Campbell, who didn't have what you'd call a typical shaped career in teaching. Thank you for joining me this morning, Helen. It's really nice to see you.
My pleasure.
So tell us what was atypical about your teaching career.
When I ran away from school. I ran away from college when I was young and romantically involved. Went back to college later on, intending to be an art teacher. That was my plan. I was an artist to start with, and discovered psychology, which transformed everything for me. I moved from doing an arts degree to doing a science degree, and completed my bachelor's in combined sciences. And I was teaching before I'd even got my exam results, because psychology teachers are very hard to find. And I walked straight into teaching. All of my friends were teachers, and they helped me to, they literally told me how to be a teacher. They taught me to be a teacher. And I was teaching, I had to have the day off school to go and have my degree certificate, actually, which surprised all my colleagues, I have to say. But my friends helped me out, taught me to be a teacher, and I was always freelance. I've never had a teaching contract. I was teaching 3 different colleges in 3 different towns, which is hard work. But I have to say that, having listened to your videos, and I used to think, oh, this won't, how does my career fit in here? The things I was experiencing were just the same. My very often people who were in contracts and doing it the normal way were going through the same stages at me at roughly the same time as well. 3 years in, I got to a critical point. 3 years in, I was exhausted. I was suffering terrible bullying, having a very difficult time, and completely independent as a freelancer, totally on your own, apart from my friends supporting me.
Yeah.
Who had experienced bullying and things like that. But I tried to get out then. The first thing I did was, try and get out. And I literally walked out of teaching and took some time out. My hair was dropping out. My nails are split. One of my nails has never recovered since the 90s. I've had a cracked nail that doesn't heal. But
that just reminds me, one year my left eyebrow fell out one year.
It's amazing.
I've forgotten about that. Yeah.
Physically reacting to the stress. And so I took a job. My friend's mother was doing caring. She worked for a company, just went around the country looking after old people, rich old people, as we said. I stayed in some fantastic houses and met some really interesting people and learned about their lives in the Raj, and stayed in stately homes, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But it's not a career. And it was quite hard work in its own way. And after a year of that, I thought, right, I need to get back in school. And I had been booked to do a summer school. And so I came back to Northampton and had a week off, and then went to the school to see what we were doing next week for the summer school. And when I got there, they said, oh my goodness, Helen's just turned up. And they'd forgotten that they'd booked me, because I'd not been around. I'd been sort of staying, in Cumbria and all over the country. And it had been cancelled because of CJD. The international students had cancelled because of CJD, and there was no work. And I suddenly found myself unemployed. And I thought, I cannot go back to that job, because I can't apply for work when I'm staying in a, country estate
houses, in
Northumberland. I can't do it. So I literally had to sign on, and it took me a long time to get a job because I was severely overqualified. And she said to me to start with, and this is the problem, you're so overqualified. When I first went and signed on, this lovely lady, she said to me, you do know you're not going to get a job, dear, don't you? And I just looked at her and I said, don't worry, it'll be okay, I'll get a job. And she said, no, you won't. And she was right.
Okay.
Because when you go for interviews, people just look at you and they can't imagine a teacher working for them. They just can't see the teacher in that job. You have to know which kind of work you're going to be applying for. And the kind of work that I was applying for, I was a psychologist. I don't fit in the places where I do fit in. I wasn't qualified to be a psychologist in those places because I'd gone for education. I wasn't really interested in clinical work. And so I couldn't get a job. I was really stuck. And then I managed to get a job at my local university, teaching undergraduate psychology because I'd got a history of teaching. So, they accepted me. And at the same time, I was doing a master's in psychology. And I did the two together, which was really tough. Had all the problems I had were with the staff, not with my students. My students were great. My staff were a nightmare. But so I got my master's degree, and then I was a university, but always freelance, constantly moving, doing different universities. And because my subject was, they struggled to find psychology teachers. And because I could teach statistics, even though I'm not, I used to struggle with that, but my way of teaching statistics gets really good results. So I was easily able to find work. But it's really tough. A lot of driving between places, and and all of the marking and the constant preparation, but trying to tie it together to make it as effective as possible. So one set of preparation could do 3 different universities. So trying to build up that bank of information, that bank of lessons that I can apply. So I was doing okay, but then I went off and discovered, I then did a master's in education, still teaching in universities and colleges. But then I discovered the work that I discovered when I did my training, and I thought, this is why I became a psychologist. This is what interests me. So I gave it up. And I went freelance as a psychologist in business. I was offered a job working in a company by someone who I taught. He came to find me and he said, we need you. So I went to work with them for a year or so. And I set up myself as a trainer. And I've been, doing that for over 20 years now. But when I went back into, setting up a business and teaching something that nobody knows exists is tough. People don't know what emotional skills are. They don't understand. And 20 years ago, it was like saying, I teach fairy dust. Nobody knew what it was. Everybody knows now what emotional intelligence is. But I went back into teaching, aiming to do 2 or 3 days a week as a supply teacher. And then I spent 16, 17 years as a supply teacher, which consumed my time.
I can imagine that most people watching this who have been in schools where they've seen how supply teachers, when I first started teaching, obviously most cover was done by the staff because you had to do cover in your free periods. So there weren't that many supply teachers. But then increasingly, as our commitment to having to do cover was reduced, and before they invented cover supervisors, obviously there were quite a lot of supply teachers around, and we all saw how they got treated. So people watching this might be thinking, 16 years doing supply, oh my God, how did you survive that?
I survived that by being smarter than the kids. The kids in Northampton know me, they call me Mrs. Toffee. And I used my own behavioural program. It involves a bag of toffees. It's really simple. And people used to run to my lessons. They used to run down the corridor to get there first so they could give the books out. I didn't have problems. I was very strict, very fair. I also come from their area. So, I'm one of them. They thought that was very strange because they thought I was posh. But I don't come from a posh area. But just being smarter than them and, getting them under control and winning them over. And I've taught I used to be booked by the year, the agency who were charging a fortune for me. They only had to make 2 phone calls a year for me. They would just phone up one school and say, are you interested in having Helen Campbell next year? and they'd say, oh, I'll ask. And then they'd phone the other school and say, well, we've got so and so interested in Helen Campbell, but we said we'd wait and ask you first. And they used to just take me there and then. And that was the only phone call they made for me. I was in for the year. And I would have my own classes. It was very tough. And they expected me to behave like a normal teacher. You know, the things that were normally expected of a supply teacher, that didn't apply to me. So it was a kind of a crossbreed between the two. But I got to know my colleagues, some of whom were wonderful and some of whom weren't. You know, I come across the politics in schools. I was warned before I started teaching. The politics in schools makes the United Nations look like a nursery school. And, you know, to be powerless in that situation as a supply teacher.
Yeah,
it's very easy to be powerless and to be a victim. But, you know, I did well. I enjoyed my work. I enjoyed my students, but it was incredibly tough. You know, to be a supply teacher, in the first 2 years of teaching are tough. Every day in supply teaching is tough. You never pick up an old lesson and teach it again. Every lesson you teach is the first time you taught it. You have to really know your general knowledge. You have to know the syllabus that the kids are learning, and you have to be fearless. And even I've taught classes with kids who other teachers didn't want to be in a room with, but I was protected. I was protected by the children. You know, if anybody had a go at me, other children would have told them to stop. And that was a worry to some teachers. They thought that was strange. But the reason it wasn't the toffees, it was the fact that in my class, we were under control. Everybody got to behave, and everybody was learning something new. Because I was, in some ways, free to do more interesting education. Their lessons were more interesting because I wasn't in the system. I taught what was needed to be taught, but I was able to teach it in different ways. And they used to say, please take a contract. And I'd say, if I took a contract, I'd have to be just like your other teachers. You know, it's only the freedom of not being in a contract that enables me to make your lessons fun. And I survived.
Did you have Campbell Education running alongside that, or was that shelved?
I opened Campbell Education when I went completely freelance and left the agency. I set up Campbell Education as I was freelance. I didn't really need to advertise. I just let the schools know I was available. You know, I'd learned something from the agency. And the minute I went freelance, I was just straight into a school, and I didn't actually leave there until I got sick. I got sick and had to leave. But I also wanted to offer services to teachers outside. I was helping so many teachers, you know, particularly young teachers who were, some of them had literally only done a few months in the classroom preparing to be teachers, and then they were there in class, in front of classroom children, with virtually no preparation. And I was helping those children. They came to me because A, they knew they could, I would help, and B, I wasn't in the system. It was safe to come to me because they weren't going to their line manager, which is a constant thing in school. And I helped a lot of them to learn to relax, to stay in control of yourself so that you could be in control of your class. And just help them to arrange themselves and their classrooms in a way that would maintain calm behaviour and create an environment where they could be in control.
So we are going to do another interview, aren't we? Record another one, which will focus very much on how you can help teachers with what you do now.
Yeah, that was very much part of me just supporting the team there, whichever school
I was in. Is that what gave you the idea for how you could develop Campbell Education to be more of a service?
Yeah, they kept saying to me, you ought to be doing this. You should be doing this. And I said, well, I would do if people wanted it, you know. So I set it up, the problem being that everyone's too exhausted. You know, you ask a teacher on a Wednesday if they can pop out of the house and drive to my house and find a parking spot in my street and come and see me for an hour. You know, they can't even wake up. They're asleep on the sofa. But these days with Zoom, it's totally different.
Yeah.
You know, you
Yeah,
don't
that's a
even
game
have to
changer,
change. You don't
isn't
have
it?
to put your shoes on. You can just
Mm.
log on, do your hour, feel better, and then log off. It's a complete game changer, Zoom.
So
But it enabled me to survive in supply teaching. And one of the things that people used to say to me is, you never lose it, do you? Well, yes, I do when I choose to. You know, when I want to shout at them, I can shout at them. I used to work on a market stall. I could shout. But once you've shouted, you then have to apologize to the people who didn't deserve to be shouted at, because they didn't deserve to be shouted at, and show that you're actually in control. You haven't lost control.
So at what point did the supply teaching diminish, and Campbell education, the emotional intelligence training, sort of
It
become?
didn't diminish, it crashed, because I was already ill. I was getting quite sick. I was running down, because my original plan had been to do sort of 3 days a week and then have 2 days a week writing and teaching, coaching.
Yeah.
It was obvious that teachers couldn't be coached in the daytime. They couldn't. They don't have the time. And schools just couldn't, you know, they just wanted me all of the time, and the children needed me all of the time. And then I got sick. It was the first day of the holidays in 2019. It was, I believe, the 18th of July. And I sat here and I felt really, really ill. It was the hottest day we'd ever had, and I thought it was the heat. I thought I was suffering from the heat. And but I wasn't. I got a virus, and I know several people who had it. It was a 6-week virus, and they were all very ill for 6 weeks. But I just didn't get better.
Right.
I just couldn't shake it off. I didn't go back to school in the September. I went back in the October for 3 days a week. I did Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Got through the weekend, and then I was doing Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And by Tuesday, I was just sitting there in the staff room, and someone came in and said, "Oh my God, are you all right?" No. They said, "Go home." I looked like a corpse, apparently.
Right.
I couldn't get home. I couldn't drive. So I managed to get myself into the car, and I drove to my house very slowly through the traffic. And that's the last time I went to work. I just was so ill. And when people talk about long COVID, it sounds exactly like what I was experiencing. It was a post-viral fatigue. And I never did get back to work. By the time I was ready to start thinking about getting back to work, we had lockdown.
Yeah.
So I've never been back into school since then, apart from when I went to collect my mug and my bits and bobs. You know.
Lucky it was still there. So since then, you've been developing your service.
Yes. Well, I was very ill for a long time, and I was very lucky that I had a next door neighbour who came in and taught me how to run a business online. You know, she taught me she showed me Zoom, she showed me how to set up Calendly. She really changed things for me. And although I'm still not 100%, you know, I'm still recovering. I still get very tired. But I'm getting to the point now where I'll be ready to start really pushing my business and moving forward. It's taken quite a long time, but sometimes life gets in the way, you know. But I'm not saying I wouldn't want to go back into school, because I miss school. I miss, having said that, you know, when I walk into a school now, very few of the kids are going to know who I am. I might get some sixth formers dropping in on my lessons to say hello, you know, but the young kids won't know who I am.
No.
Because they will never have met me. So I would be starting from scratch, you know. But I know how to do it. I can turn things around. If I went into a new school for a week and I didn't get an offer of a job by the end of the week, I used to feel I'd let myself down, really. You know.
Well, there's an example of that, the pressure that we put ourselves under that we were talking about before.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to go home thinking, you haven't done it well there. But no, I might well go back into school later on when there's no risk of, you know, health risks are a big issue for me.
Yeah.
So
So you obviously had your neighbour who helped you. I think I know who you mean as well. Who
yes, you
helped
do know,
you to
don't you?
set stuff up. Um,
Yeah.
and hasn't she done well? Crikey.
Hasn't she done
Anyway,
well?
yeah. Um, so, but I mean, if she hadn't been there to help you, how do you think you would have coped with the whole
I
spring
honestly don't
calendar?
know. I don't know. I would have gone back to school. I probably would have collapsed again.
Mm.
And because I was self-employed, of course, when you're a supply teacher, you don't have any insurance.
No.
There's no sick pay. You know, you're on your own. And all the way through being freelance, all the way through lockdown, I had no help at all. You know, you're on your own.
Mm.
So I have survived. I'm quite impressed with myself for doing that. I don't intend to be in the same situation again. But I do miss teaching. I love teaching adults though.
Mm.
My ideal would be I would love to go into schools and actually teach the teachers rather than the kids. You know, to go in on an inset day and show people how to take care of themselves would be. I've done that before. I love that. Although teachers, I have to say, are the worst students in the world, aren't they? Be honest, they really are. I've been there for a day's teaching, inset teaching, and they have to drag them out of their staff room to get them into the room, and then they sit there and pick holes and everything. You know, they're the
Yeah,
worst.
I think the issue with that, probably from my own experience, was that a lot of the time you'd be thinking, I've got a whole day here without kids. I could be getting so much
Yeah,
work done. This better
yeah.
be good.
I know. I've been there. I've done that. And all I can say is that, you know, this is really for them. It's not for the school. It's not training in systems. It's not, you know, this is how we're going to use the new detention system, and this is what you must do when you fill in this form. It's about looking after you, keeping you well. I wrote a book some time ago, which I didn't publish. It was called Surviving Teaching. And a friend of mine who's in business, she read through it for me for, you know, reading it for common sense. And she said, Helen, you're going to have to take this out of the book because you won't get into a school if you leave in there that I'm going to teach you how to say no to your management.
But that is a book that is very much needed, and I think would. I like hotcakes.
Well, maybe I'll have to brush it off, and I have actually got it somewhere on this desk, although I don't have the computer file that it's on. But it really is. It's about setting boundaries. You know, you've got to protect yourself from your job. The boundaries are for both our benefits, for us and the school and the children too. But it's very difficult to set boundaries in teaching because it's all consuming.
Yeah, so we will discuss that more in the next interview we're going to do.
Yeah.
But so your emotional intelligence training isn't just for teachers, is it?
No.
It's for all grown-ups.
Yeah. I don't teach children. I teach adults how to teach children, actually. I've you know, when people come to me because they've got teenagers, I've done a lot of teenage parents. Their lovely children have just turned into monsters and they really just don't know what to do about it. So I show them, you know, we just work it out. We just outsmart them, you know. But it's training in thinking. It's how to think through and how to process emotional information. Emotion is it's nothing special. It's just energy in your body being switched on, and you're experiencing it, and you interpret it for yourself. If you've got a new way to interpret it that's really simple, you know, and learn to manage it in really simple ways, then it puts you in control of it. And there's no one more skilled at managing your emotions than 9Y. You know, 9Y know your emotions inside out. They can see when you walk into the room what state you're in. And their task in life is to find your buttons and press those buttons. And they know how to do it. If you don't know where your buttons are, ask 9Y. They'll tell you. Right? So you need to be able to recognize when you're activated, and you need to be the person in charge of the engine. You need to person turning down the engine or choosing what you're going to do with the energy, because they will play with you. I'm a supply teacher. I know what I'm talking about, right? They will play with you for their own entertainment, even if it damages themselves. They will play with you for their own entertainment.
Do you think part of your success of having this long career of supply teaching was because you are a psychologist and you had an insight into how to circumvent the mind games that they would be trying to play with you?
Absolutely. The early training, when I first qualified, I did counselling training, which I decided not to go into. Counselling isn't for me. Counselling is, I want to prevent it from happening, not deal with it afterwards. I'm all about learning and prevention and being smart as possible and doing things as well as possible to get the best outcomes. So applying my psychology to my students, and you know, that's what I do with other teachers. I explain to them, we unpack it. You know, supervision is about unpacking things and working out what on earth is going on and why are you doing that and why are they doing that, you know, and you can't always tell why they're doing that, but you do need to know what you're doing, and you need to make sure that you're in control of that. And we're dealing with and you know, very often it's the most charming kids, the ones who know how to play you, you know. You need to be able to recognize that. You need to be able to put a brake on that, keep control of that, because every one of those slight incursions into your boundaries is a risk to your health and well-being. And you know, you really need to have those professional boundaries, but it has to be said, the system doesn't encourage teachers to have boundaries against them.
Do you find in your work that people in other professions are easier to work with than teachers because they are more receptive to the idea of boundaries, and that's the job and this is my life and there's water between the two, whereas with teachers it's very my job is my life is my job.
I mean, it's the classic, isn't it? You go to a dinner party, if there's two teachers there, that's it. No boundaries. And
the thing is, when you are a teacher, a lot of the people you know are teachers. Dinner parties.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I would love to set up situations where teachers can work together away from school to work through those issues, which just has all of its own political issues, its own political problems. My ideal I'd love to run teachers' retreats, you know, where you could go to somewhere, imagine going somewhere like Centre Parks for a week with your family, but that once a day you get an opportunity to go and meet some other teachers and take an issue that you need to deal with and work on that issue and come away with a solution.
Yeah, so not just a watch fest, actually something concrete, just sharing good practice.
Yes, learning. This is all about learning and prevention. It's learning about skilling you, making sure you've got all the resources that you need, and that when you got an issue, say, and it can very easily be a bullying issue. You know, there's an awful lot of bullying in school, and it's not the kids. You know, we know that. To unpack that and look for solutions and put things in place that protect you and make sure that you're fulfilling your role in school, but that you're protected from other people's lack of skill, usually. That's what it usually comes down to. Other people's lack of skill causing problems to other people.
Right. I think what we'll do is, because we're very much now straying into the area.
Yes, I know. No boundaries.
So, so if we say thank you very much, Helen, for this interview about your teaching career and setting up your business and how Campbell Education can help people. And there will be another interview going live, which we're going to record now, all about actually what you do to help people with their emotional intelligence. So thank you very much for talking to us.
Pleasure. And